Today we're going to talk about Biden's turning point speech against fascism and extremism, and not only the Republican response, but the media's response too. And I have two interviews this week. I talked to former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner about the empty classified folders found in Mar-a-Lago, what punishments Trump can face, and even whether he'd be able to run for president if he's in prison. And I'm joined by Christy Smith, the Democrat running for California's 27th congressional district, one of the most flippable districts in the entire country, about just how dangerous her Republican opponent is and how polling is looking so far. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So this past week, President Biden continued staying on the offense in the face of Republican attacks on democracy, on women's reproductive rights, on LGBT Americans, and gun safety. He held a primetime rally at Independence Hall in Philadelphia, and here's just some of what he said.
But as I stand here tonight, equality and democracy are under assault. We do ourselves no favor to pretend otherwise. So tonight, I've come to this place where it all began to speak as plainly as I can to the nation about the threats we face, about the power we have in our own hands to meet these threats, and about the incredible future that lies in front of us if only we choose it. Too much of what's happening in our country today is not normal. Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans represent an extremism that threatens the very foundations of our republic. Now, I want to be very clear up front. Not every Republican, not even the majority of Republicans are MAGA Republicans. Not every Republican embraces their extreme ideology. I know, because I've been able to work with these mainstream Republicans. But there's no question that the Republican Party today is dominated, driven, and intimidated by Donald Trump and the MAGA Republicans. And that is a threat to this country.
First of all, good. For a guy like Joe Biden, who is the sole defender of bipartisanship in this country, to come out on the offense and call out Trump, call out these MAGA Republicans, call out what they're doing is impactful. Again, for that guy who has almost to a fault stopped short of being combative with those people, for him to finally sound the alarm will hopefully resonate with people and convey just how bad things have gotten on the right. So good on Biden, and I really hope that the attacks that are coming from the right that I'm going to talk about in just a moment don't cause him to recoil, but only embolden him. The GOP is on the defense for the first time in years, so the last thing we should be doing is relenting and allowing them to take back the narrative. Now, as I just mentioned, as far as Republicans are concerned, their response to this speech was full fainting spells and pearl clutching. I mean, you would think that these people just emerged from Amish country the way they reacted to Biden's speech, a speech decrying fascism and extremism. Here's a hint. If you're personally offended by a speech decrying extremism and fascism, you're the fascist or extremist. If that's what sent you into a tailspin, Biden was talking about you. I don't know, I find it so funny that the party that hosted a fascist Hungarian autocrat at CPAC to speak about how the Republican Party should embrace fascist tactics is really upset now about being called fascists. This is the party that spent the last 2 years calling the left pedophiles and groomers and communists and traitors, and now when Biden calls a guy and his supporters who tried to overthrow the U.S. government fascists, suddenly they act like name-calling is out of bounds? I mean, come on. And one last note on these Republicans and their fainting spells over being called extremist and fascist, and that is that it must be nice not to be bound by any sense of shame or hypocrisy, because here's a little mashup that Mehdi Hassan put together that pokes a bit of a hole in the GOP's faux outrage about just how unprecedented and uniquely dangerous it was that Joe Biden uttered the word fascism.
I think they're fascists. I think they want to use the power of the state to change the rest of us.
Falsely branding a political protest as an insurrection, that is the definition of authoritarianism, of fascism.
Their tactics are fascistic. The left wants power because that is essentially their state of grace.
The blackout of information by the left is pure fascism.
Turns out there are fascists in charge.
Nancy Pelosi is fascistic.
They're using, frankly, fascist policies to silence the right.
They use cancel culture as a tool to impose their fascism on us.
Well, I won't say fascists, but yeah, fascists.
This is fascism. This is fascism of the left.
You were talking about fascism.
There's no other word to describe this. This is fascism.
So yeah, something to remember the next time a Republican has the vapors over the word fascism. But I'm not actually concerned about these MAGA Republicans here. These are the same people who defended storming the Capitol and then pretended to be outraged when they're rightly called fascist. The whole world can see that they're full of shit. I won't waste my breath. My beef is actually with what came next in the media. A few journalists and reporters decided that in a speech where the president decried the rise of authoritarianism in the US, that the real issue here, the real threat to democracy, was the fact that Biden was flanked by 2 Marines, and so the optics of a politicized military were just too much to bear. You may have heard about CNN's Breonna Kylar's tweet where she said, "Whatever you think of this speech, the military is supposed to be apolitical. Positioning Marines in uniform behind President Biden for a political speech flies in the face of that. It's wrong when Democrats do it. It's wrong when Republicans do it." CNN's Jeff Zeleny said, "There's nothing unusual or wrong with the president delivering a political speech. It's inherent in the job description, but doing it against the backdrop of 2 Marines standing at attention and the Marine band is a break with White House traditions." And this all comes under the backdrop of new leadership at CNN under Chris Licht, who has made clear his hope to see more Republicans making appearances on that network. This past week also saw Brian Stelter and John Harwood, who reportedly had more time left on their contracts, get pushed out of the network. John Malone, a major shareholder in Warner Brothers Discovery, which is the parent company of the CNN, said he wants, quote, "the news portion of CNN to be more centrist." And so I think those tweets from Kylar and Zeleny are proof of exactly that. Like them complaining that in a speech condemning fascism, Biden broke the norms because Marines were visible. In other words, even though one side has authoritarians who won't accept election results if they don't win and are keen to foment violence to achieve their political ends, Biden's just as bad because a Marine was behind him. Because both sides. Here's what I'm not understanding, because ostensibly there are smart people who run that network, but desperately grabbing out for Republican support by airing all these false equivalencies is not going to bring any Republicans over to CNN. They're still going to call that network fake news. They're still going to chant CNN sucks at their rallies. The only difference is that now Democrats are going to think that network sucks too because of the obvious pandering. That's the growth strategy at a time when fewer and fewer people are tuning into cable news, to abandon the only people left still willing to tune in. And granted, it's not just CNN. The Washington Post editorial board posted an article with the title, "Democracy is in Danger. Biden should invoke patriotism, not partisanship," to make that point. The New York Times obviously has a long history of not only both sidesism, but also allowing bad faith Republicans to dictate their coverage, which is why we had 24 cover stories about Hillary's emails, which Republicans obviously cared very much about, the way that, they're all condemning Trump now for mishandling classified documents. Oh, wait. But the point here is that a major problem in this country is where some members of the media, not all, but definitely some, are more interested in covering the horse race of politics than actual attacks on democracy. Like, I get that the media should be neutral, but that neutrality should be on a pro-democracy curve. There has to be a baseline, like a common understanding of what should be expected in this country, and support for democracy, acceptance of election results, and opposition to political violence are all part of that. If you're a media company and you treat those things as both sides issues, then you're not some innocent bystander in the fall of democracy. You are helping perpetuate it. And look, I know that I complain about the media, and it would be easy for me to say, this is why independent media is important, and this is why independent media is important. But those networks are still a vital part of our democracy, and we all rely on their reporting. But nothing would help usher in the fall of democracy faster than our media's insistence on continuing to pretend that everything the GOP does is just politics as usual and just as legitimate and valid as what happens on the left, just because they're a major political party on the right. The two parties are not the same, and if the media can't recognize that, then they're only helping install a party whose first victim will be the free press. To check out this week's interviews, where I talked to former federal prosecutor Glenn Kirshner about the empty classified folders found in Mar-a-Lago, what punishments Trump can face, and even whether he'd be able to run for president if he's in prison, and I talked to Christy Smith, a Democrat running for California's 27th congressional district, one of the most flippable districts in the country, about just how dangerous her Republican opponent is, and how polling is looking in her district so far. Click the thumbnails right here on this screen, or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel.